Good morning, everyone. So yesterday was the last day to register for the election in 2 weeks, the primary. But it's not too late to register for the election, presidential election in November. So, today I'm gonna talk about voter apathy, millennials. I'm gonna try to convince you all, because I know some of you are eligible to vote and you don't vote. So I'm gonna try to convince you guys to step up and use your power and use your voice and participate. We're all directly or indirectly affected by our elected officials and by the government decisions. I myself have voted since I was 18. When I turned 18 in the 70s, it was just kind of how I was raised. I don't think I've missed an election. Voting is not only a constitutional right under our under our Constitution, it's more than a privilege, it's really kind of a responsibility. And it's important. The government is not just someone else or the officials that are elected, it belongs to all of us. So we all need to collectively step up and participate to maintain a productive, vibrant, and meaningful government. So I'm going to talk about apathy. We'll go back. I'm going to talk about apathy and what an apathetic voter is. And then I'm going to talk about millennials and why they think their vote doesn't count or doesn't matter. And then a little bit about some unfounded fears about why people may not want to vote. So first, I'm going to talk about what apathy is. So apathy is when you don't care or you're not concerned with it. So an apathetic voter is someone who, I can't be bothered, I'm not interested in politics, I don't have time, it's not my thing. It's a really big problem in the United States because when you don't step up and vote, you have no voice. And you give your power away to someone else, probably an old white man who doesn't have the same opinions and thoughts that you do, and you're really delegating your power to a complete stranger who doesn't think like you guys do. So Dawn Klipstein of the Center for Info Research on Civic Learning and Engagement states, in the last presidential election in 2012, 74% of millennials did not vote. That's 3/4 of that demographic did not vote. Now, I'm a baby boomer, I was born in 59. Like over 55% of my age group participates and votes. So that's why all these politicians in Washington, they placate to my age group because they think that the millennials don't care. And I know all of you care. So I want to talk a little bit about millennials and what they are and why they feel that their vote doesn't count or doesn't matter. So a millennial is someone who was born after 1984 and before 2000. So everyone can kind of put if you're in that group, do the math. So Ari Berman, I'm going to give you 3 examples of why your vote counts and why it matters. I could give you 1,000 examples of this, but I picked 3 that are really good examples. So Ari Berman of The Nation magazine, he's really famous. He's on MSNBC all the time. In his August 2015 edition, the 2000 presidential campaign, which was 16 years ago, probably a lot of students in the class were like kindergarten, grade school. That was when George W. Bush and Al Gore ran against each other. That election, of the millions of Americans that voted in that election was decided by 327 votes in one state, in Florida. And there was eventually a Republican judge that decided it, and later they found out that she was conversing with the Bush administration, so there was some ethics violation that she got caught for. But the point is that election was so tight. We're really just talking about the 3 classrooms on this hallway. If all of the students in these 3 classrooms had voted differently, we would have had a completely different president. You're not going to convince the Washington State voters that your vote doesn't matter, doesn't count. That same year in 2004, they voted for governor. 2.8 million Washington voters voted, And that governor was elected by 129, a difference of 129 votes. So that's like this classroom and the two next to us. These are really tight margins. You're not going to convince Puerto Ricans that your vote doesn't matter, doesn't count. In 2004, they elected a new president, and Eric Schmidt of the New York Times, November 9th of 2000, said if 539 Puerto Ricans would have each convinced 3 other Puerto Rican voters to vote, Puerto Rico, 12 years ago, would have become the 51st state of the United States. We would have had to change the flag. These are really tight margins. Your vote matters. So I want to talk a little bit about dispelling fears in voting. I know a lot of you I've gotten to know a lot of you, and it broke my heart when some of you shared that you're living with relatives or friends that possibly are undocumented citizens. And it broke my heart that you were sacrificing your own constitutional rights as an American not to participate or vote because of a fear. And there's no documented cases or research where somebody was arrested by ICE and deported because another citizen in that house at that same residence had voted. So Morgan Fletchner, in his 2008 Voting in American book, said ICE targets work establishment. Most of the deportations we hear about on the news, they go into places of work, and that's where these poor people are arrested or deported. So I hope I've dispelled some of those fears. And voting is a constitutional right. It's more than a privilege, it's a responsibility. We collectively need to all step up and participate so that we have a productive and vibrant and meaningful government. I've talked about apathy and what it is to be an apathetic voter, what a millennial is, and why millennials is the largest group that doesn't participate. And we've talked about some of the fears in voting. This is an actual LA County voter register form. You can pick them up in the post office. You don't have to ask anybody. They're on the counter. They're in racks there. So, in closing, 250 years ago, that we had immigrants come to this country that risked their lives to set up the government so that we could all participate in it. They met in the dark in candlelight in Philadelphia. The British soldiers were outside ready to arrest them for treason. Their wives were raped. Their property was absconded. They set up the government for all of us to participate. So Janet Leigh, in her 2010 Oxford Handbook of American Elections and Political Behavior, said when voters are apathetic, they essentially give the decision-making authority to corporations and lobbyists. Everyone in here is too smart and too bright not to have your voice heard and participate. So speak up, empower yourself, and vote. Thanks.